Arizona Territory, August 1882. The sun was a merciless god overhead and the desert stretched in every direction like a sea of fire. Galen Zeller had been riding half a day without seeing another soul. His boots were coated in dust, his horse's flanks glistened with sweat, and the canteen at his hip sloshed with only a few swallows left. He had not planned to cross this part of the Mojave, but a broken axle on an army supply wagon had blocked the trail north. So he cut east, trusting instinct and the shape of the land. That was when he saw her. A body in the sand. He pulled the reins. His gelding snorted, uneasy. Galen swung down, boots sinking into hot earth. The woman was crumpled on her side, skirts tangled around her legs, face blistered red from the sun. Her lips were cracked, eyes barely open. He knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly, tapping her cheek. "Can you hear me?" Her lashes fluttered. She tried to speak, but her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Without another word, Galen pulled his canteen free and held it to her lips. She drank like someone who had been dying because she probably had been. He let her sip slow, careful not to choke her. When she leaned back, breath shaky but steadier, her eyes met his for the first time. They were green. Earth green. Like cottonwoods near a river, like life itself. "I thought I was dead," she whispered. "You are not," Galen said. "Not today." She tried to sit up, winced. He steadied her shoulders. "Name's Galen Zeller," he said. She blinked slow. "Faye O'Connell." He nodded. "You out here alone?" Faye looked away. "My wagon broke down 2 days ago. I was trying to walk to Gila Bend." Her voice cracked again. "My children," Galen's stomach dropped. "You are a mother?" She nodded, closing her eyes. "Twins. Abigail and Amos. They are 5. I left them with my sister in Prescott. I was headed back after burying my husband in Tucson." Galen sat back on his heels. He looked at the horizon, then back at her. "Faye, you were lucky I found you. Let us get you on my horse. There is a water stop maybe 3 miles east." She nodded faintly. He helped her up slow, arms around her waist, careful not to hurt her. Her body was lean, small, but heavy with exhaustion. She did not flinch from his touch. She leaned into it. Once she was in the saddle, Galen walked beside the horse, reins in hand, keeping close. Faye kept her eyes on him. "You saved my life," she said after a while. Galen gave a low nod. "You are not the first lost soul I have come across in these parts. But I have never seen eyes like yours." She looked away, but her cheeks colored. They reached an old mail stop near dusk, a burned-out shell of a building. But the well still worked. Galen helped her down, filled the canteen again, then let her drink until she sighed in relief. He built a fire from brittle mesquite and got beans warming in a tin. Faye sat with her knees pulled up under her skirt, hands trembling around the cup he gave her. Galen watched her in the fire's glow. She was no stranger to hardship, the kind of woman who had seen sorrow and survived it. "Where will you go?" he asked. "I need to get back to Prescott," she said. "My children will be waiting. But I do not know if I can cross that desert again. I could take you. You do not even know me." He shrugged. "You are a mother. You are alone. That is enough." She looked at him for a long time, and something in her eyes softened. "You are kind." "I am not," Galen said. "Just tired of watching good people die." They ate in silence after that. The fire cracked between them. Galen rolled out his blanket and offered it to her, but she shook her head. "I will sleep close," she said. "If that is all right?" He nodded once. "Of course." She lay down beside him, not touching, but near enough that he could see the slow rise of her chest, the way her hand curled under her cheek. He watched her fall asleep, the firelight catching the curve of her jaw, the line of her lashes. That night, Galen did not sleep. He just looked at her, this woman who had stumbled out of death and into his path, and tried to understand why his chest ached the way it did. By morning, he knew. He wanted her to live. Not just survive, but live. With him. They left at dawn. Faye rode better that day, color returning to her face. She talked more. Told him about her children, how Amos was stubborn and Abigail liked to sing. Her voice lit up when she said their names. "I used to dream of building a little schoolhouse," she said. "Before my husband died. I taught letters back in Missouri. But dreams do not always follow you out west. Some do, Galen said. She looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them. Not words, not promises. Just a quiet understanding. 3 days later, they reached Prescott. Her sister's house stood at the edge of the woods, a modest white clapboard home with laundry fluttering on the line. The children ran out before the horse stopped moving. "Mama!" Faye screamed their names and slid off the saddle before Galen could help her. The twins threw themselves into her arms. Galen stayed back, watching the way she wrapped them up, held them like she would never let go again. Her sister came out next, startled, then crying, and ushered them all inside. Galen waited outside, unsure if he should leave. He turned to go. "Galen." He stopped. Faye stood at the porch, hair wild from the ride, eyes fixed on him. "You are not going to disappear now, are you?" He walked back slow, boots crunching on gravel. "I was thinking maybe I should." She stepped down and came to him. Her hands reached for his without hesitation. "I do not want you to." Her voice caught. "You gave me back my life. You gave me something too," he said. "I did not know I still had anything left to find in this world, Faye. But then I saw you in the sand. And I have not wanted to leave your side since." She smiled, eyes shining. "Then do not." He kissed her there, in the yard, with the sun climbing high and the wind soft through the pines. It was not rushed. It was not loud. But it was full of everything they had not said, everything they had held back. And when her fingers curled into his shirt and she leaned her forehead against his, Galen knew. He was home. The kitchen held the warmth of boiled coffee and rising bread, the light slanting through the lace curtains in narrow bars. Galen sat at the edge of the table, shoulders stiff in his borrowed shirt, hands folded loosely before him. The children were outside, chasing sticks and hollering like the world had never cracked open. Faye stood by the stove, tying her braid with twine she'd pulled from the flour sack. "I didn't expect you to stay," she said without turning. "I didn't expect to want to," Galen replied. She glanced over her shoulder. "My sister says there's work at the livery. They're short a hand. I've shoveled worse." Faye smiled faintly and leaned on the counter, her fingers running across the worn grain of the wood. Her sleeves were rolled and a faint burn marked the crease of her elbow, old and silver white. "You ever think about settling?" she asked. "I used to," Galen said. "Before the war. Before I figured out I didn't carry stillness well." He looked at his hands. "But maybe I just hadn't found the right soil." She crossed the room and sat across from him, their knees nearly touching beneath the table. Her eyes stayed on his face, steady. "I don't need promises," she said. "But I won't have my children grow fond of someone who leaves with the next thaw." "I don't make quick choices," he said. "But when I do, I carry them through." Her hands rested on the table now, close enough he could see the thin scar that ran along her knuckle. Her fingers bore the signs of years spent mending, chopping, hauling water. She didn't hide them. "My boy Amos, he's got a temper. He kicks at things when he's scared. Abigail's quieter, but she watches everything. You'll know when she doesn't trust you." "I'd expect no less." The front door opened and the twins thundered in, cheeks flushed with sun. Amos had a scrape on his knee and Abigail carried a feather, solemn as a priest. They paused when they saw Galen. Faye stood. "Wash up, both of you. We'll eat soon." Abigail studied Galen as she passed, her gaze level. "Do you know how to whittle?" "Some," he said. "Why?" "I need a new spoon." He nodded. "I reckon I can manage." Her eyes narrowed, satisfied. Amos didn't say a word, just ducked his head and followed his sister to the wash basin. Faye waited until they were out of earshot. "They don't take to strangers fast." "I don't either." She sat down again. "There's a plot east of town. Belongs to a neighbor who moved to Flagstaff. House needs repairs, but there's a stove and the roof's mostly sound. You thinkin' of talking it?" "I'm thinking of giving my children a home that's ours, not borrowed." She looked at him. "But I can't do it alone." Galen let the words settle. The tick of the wall clock filled the room. "I've done a fair bit of mending," he said. "Can set shingles, dig a line. I don't spook easy." Faye's eyes didn't soften. They sharpened. "This isn't a rescue. I'm not looking for someone to carry me. I know. It's work. And it's hard. I've been through worse." She nodded once. "Good." He reached for his hat on the chair beside him. "I'll speak to the livery this afternoon." She stood as he did, her hand brushing the edge of his coat. "If you mean to stay," she said, voice low, "then stay." He looked down at her, at the steadiness that had taken root beneath her ribs and the way she didn't flinch from hope anymore. "I'm not a man who leaves what he's chosen." "Then choose this." He didn't answer with words. His hand found hers, rough palm to rough palm, and she didn't pull away. Not even when the children came back in, dripping water and dragging mud across the floor. That evening, after supper, Galen sat on the porch steps. Amos leaned against his shoulder, half asleep, and Abigail was curled beside Faye, head tucked beneath her chin. The air smelled of pine and sun-warmed earth. Somewhere, a lark called once and fell silent. Faye looked out across the darkening yard. "You said you didn't carry stillness well." "I didn't," Galen said. "But maybe stillness isn't quiet. Maybe it's belonging." She nodded against the top of Abigail's head. "Then maybe we're both learning." He reached for her hand again, and she gave it to him without hesitation. The stars came out slow, one by one. None of them moved. The first frost came early that year, brushing the edges of the high grass with silver and lifting steam from the horses' backs before the sun cleared the trees. Galen rose before light, laced his boots by lantern, and headed for the livery with his coat collar turned high. The work was steady, mending harnesses, splitting hay, checking hooves for stone, but it wasn't what kept him there. Not really. Each evening, he walked the road back to the small plot east of town, where the chimney smoked slow and steady and the windows glowed warm through the dark. Faye met him at the door with a nod or a quiet touch to his arm, and sometimes Abigail would press a new drawing into his hand without a word. Amos still watched him from the corners of things, waiting, measuring, but his fists stayed unclenched. One morning, Faye stood by the fence behind the house, her sleeves still damp from washing. The wind tugged at her braid, and the line of her shoulders was stiffer than usual. "School inspector came through town yesterday," she said as Galen stepped up beside her. "Says they're finally granting a license if there's someone to run it." He leaned on the post, eyes on the fields. "You plan on taking it?" "I'm thinking on it." She turned toward him. "It's not just letters and sums. There be children from out past Granite Creek. Some don't speak English. Families don't trust government hands. Wouldn't be easy? You've never looked for easy." She gave a short breath through her nose. "No, but it's different now. I'm not just deciding for myself." "You'd be good at it," Galen said. "That kind of good that sticks, even when no one says thank you." She didn't answer right away. A crow passed overhead, wingbeats slow in the morning hush. "Do you ever miss drifting?" she asked. "The quiet of it?" "I don't miss the kind of silence that comes with being alone," he said. This is quieter in the right way." Faye's fingers brushed splinters from the rail. "I used to think I'd only feel settled once everything stopped hurting. But I'm starting to think it doesn't work that way." "No," he said. "I reckon it doesn't." That afternoon, they rode out to the abandoned house she'd spoken of weeks before. Galen tied the horses and shouldered the door open with a grunt. Inside, dust hung in the light like smoke, but the bones of the place were sound. The hearth still held its shape, and the floor only sagged near the back corner. Faye stepped inside, Abigail's hand in hers. Amos lagged behind, eyes on the shadows. "Could be something," she said. Galen knelt near the stove, tapping the iron plate. "Needs reseating. But it'll hold." Abigail crouched by the wall, tracing her finger along the edge of a sun-bleached drawing someone had once tacked there. "Will we live here?" she asked. Faye crouched beside her. "If we fix it up. If it feels right." Amos picked up a stick from the corner and poked it into what was left of an old wasp's nest. "I want my own bed," he said. "You'll have one," Galen said from across the room, his voice steady. "And a roof that doesn't leak." Amos didn't answer, but he didn't throw the stick either. They spent the following weeks hauling plank and mortar, patching windows, digging a trench for runoff. Galen taught Amos to set nails straight, and Faye showed Abigail how to whitewash the sills. Some nights they worked by lantern, their shadows long on the walls, the smell of pine resin thick in the air. One evening, Faye stayed after the children had gone down. She stood beside the hearth, arms folded. "You've built more than walls here," she said. "I've built what I didn't know I needed," Galen replied. She crossed to him, her hand resting against his chest. I've been afraid to want too much, but I think I want you to stay for all of it. Not just the building. His hand covered hers. You're the only thing I've ever wanted to build around. She leaned into him, her voice quiet. Then let's not wait. They married in the cold light of a November morning with only the children, her sister, and the man from the livery standing witness. Abigail carried a sprig of juniper, and Amos wore a clean shirt with the cuffs rolled neatly. Afterward, back at the house, Galen lifted her over the threshold as the children cheered, and for the first time since he could remember, he didn't think about where he'd go next. He was already there. The wind came down from the mountains in long, sighing gusts, tugging at the newly nailed shutters and rattling the stovepipe cap above the eaves. Galen stood outside the house with a drawknife in hand, stripping bark from a length of pine for the table legs he'd promised Faye. Wood shavings curled at his boots. The sun was low, but the sky held a clear, cold blue that stretched past the ridgeline like it might never end. Faye stepped out with a shawl around her shoulders, her hair pinned up in a way that left her neck bare to the wind. There's talk of a community gathering on Sunday, she said. Music, pies, some sort of harvest blessing. Galen didn't look up from the wood. You mean to go? I'd like to. It's been years since I danced. He set the knife down carefully and flexed his fingers. I don't dance much. I wasn't asking you to. Her voice held no challenge, just plain truth. But I'd like you there. Galen looked at her then. I'll be there. She smiled at that, but it was a quiet thing, more in her eyes than her mouth. Abigail wants to wear the blue dress her aunt sent from back east. I'll have to let out the hem. Amos still working on that wooden horse? He's carved the nose clean off twice. Keep starting over. Won't let me help. Stubborn, Galen said. He gets it honest. Later that evening, while the children folded quilts in the corner and the stew cooled on the stove, Faye spread a paper across the table. It was a map, hand-drawn and worn at the creases, showing the surrounding county lines and the school district boundaries. I've been asked to come before the board next week, she said. They want a plan. Books, benches, how I'll reach the outlying farms. Galen leaned over her shoulder. That's a wide stretch of land. Too wide for one woman on foot. I'll need a wagon. And time. He rubbed his jaw. I can drive you. 2 days a week, maybe 3. The livery can spare me if I trade for the extra hours on weekends. She looked up at him, brow furrowed. You sure? I wasn't made to stand still, Faye, but I was made to move with purpose. If this is yours, I'll walk beside you. She pressed her hand against the table's edge. I don't know how we'll afford the rest. Chalk, slates, oil for lamps. I've been offered a contract hauling cedar posts out near Walnut Creek. Pays double what I'm making now. It'll mean longer days, but only through December. Faye traced a thin road on the map with her fingertip. I didn't picture this, you know. Not exactly like this. Me neither, he said. But it fits better than anything I ever imagined. She folded the map again, slowly, and when her hand rested on the top corner, he placed his over it. You don't have to carry every part of this alone. I know, she said. It just takes time to unlearn the habit. That Sunday, they walked to the gathering as a family. The barn had been cleared and lanterns hung from the rafters. Fiddles played near the back, and the air smelled of cider and clove. Abigail spun in her too long blue dress, her braids flying, while Amos stood with his arms across his chest watching the older boys throw horseshoes. Faye stood near the door, watching, her shawl tucked close beneath her arms. You ever miss Missouri? Galen asked her. She shook her head. I used to, but not anymore. Why not? Because I never had this there. This kind of stillness. This kind of hope. He stepped closer, his voice low. You said you weren't asking me to dance. I'm not, she said. But I wouldn't stop you. Galen didn't answer. He just took her hand, rough against his, and led her in slow steps onto the uneven floorboards. The music shifted and they moved with it, not graceful but steady. She didn't look at the others. Neither did he. Later, they walked home beneath the stars, Abigail asleep on Faye's back and Amos holding fast to Galen's hand without a word. The road was quiet except for the crunch of frost underfoot and the hush of wind in the trees. When they reached the house, Galen set the boy down and followed Faye to the doorway. She turned before stepping inside. "You found me in the worst moment of my life." He met her eyes. "And I see the best of mine every time you look at me." She nodded once, then stepped aside to let him in. Behind them, the wind died down, and the sky held steady above the roof they'd built together. Snow fell overnight, quiet and clean, blanketing the roof and softening the fence lines. When Galen stepped outside before dawn, the world held its breath beneath the weight of it. His breath fogged the air as he reached for the axe beside the door. The woodpile needed replenishing before the sun touched the eaves. Inside, Faye stirred the pot on the stove with one hand, the other bracing the edge of her back. She'd been moving slower the past few weeks, and though she said little of it, Galen noticed the way she paused more often, how her eyes stayed on the distance longer than before. "You've been waking up before me," he said, brushing snow from his coat. "I've been thinking," she said, not turning. "About spring." He set the axe by the hearth. "Something on your mind?" "There's a parcel of land near the edge of the school district. Flat, good soil. It's been sitting idle since the family who owned it moved back east. I heard at the mercantile the deed's for sale." He took a step closer. "You want a farm?" "Not in the way my father did," she said. "But enough to feed us. Enough to teach the children how to tend something steady. I want a garden in the warm months. Maybe chickens. You think now's the time?" She turned finally, her eyes clear. "No, but I think it could be by planting season. If we start saving." He reached across the table and rested his hand over hers. "Then we'll start." That night, as they sat by the stove after supper, she pulled a folded cloth from the drawer and laid it across her lap. "A letter came last week. I didn't bring it up right away," she said. "It's from my mother's cousin in Independence. He's aging out of his work and asked if I'd consider taking in his books. Says they're school quality primers, readers, arithmetic." Galen leaned forward. "That's nearly 200 miles. He's offering them for nothing. Just wants them used." He nodded slowly. "We'd need someone to stay with the children. My sisters agreed." "Only for a week. You want me to come with you?" She hesitated, then looked at him full. "I don't want to go alone." He reached for the fire iron, stirring the coals with careful movements. "We'll leave after the thaw. Take the south road, stop in Camp Verde for supplies." She smiled, slow and sure. "I thought you'd try to talk me out of it. I've seen what happens when you set your mind on a thing. I'd rather ride beside you than follow behind." The journey came in April after the last frost lifted and the mule colt in the neighbor's barn dropped healthy in the night. They packed light, left the children wrapped in quilts under their aunt's watchful eye, and headed east along the old stage road. By the second day, the wind shifted warmer and the desert grass bent under it like prayer. They made camp beneath the bluff where the water still ran cold, and as they sat beside the fire, Faye pulled a folded quilt from the pack and handed it to him. "I stitched this while you were hauling posts last winter," she said. "Wasn't sure if I'd finish it." He unfolded it slowly. The cloth was worn in places, but the pattern was tight, interlocked stars in faded blue, stitched with patient hands. "Why stars?" he asked. "Because even when everything else changed, they didn't." He laid the quilt around her shoulders and pulled her close. "They're different now." "How?" "They've got something worth shining down on." Their return came with the bloom cottonwood buds bursting along the creek banks, wildflowers threading the edge of the road. The children ran down the lane to meet them, arms full of dandelions and questions. Abigail had lost her first tooth. Amos had carved a bird from pine that Galen recognized from the lines he'd sanded months before. The books arrived by cart 5 days later, boxes of them, tied with twine and smelling of old ink. Faye opened each one with reverence, fingers grazing the spines as if each page held breath. She started the school in May. They used the back room of the old church, benches borrowed from the Grange Hall. Galen drove her every morning before riding on to the Cedar Hall, and each afternoon he returned to find her voice hoarse from reading and her eyes lit with something fierce. By summer, the garden behind their house was sprouting with beans and squash. Abigail kept a slim notebook with pressed leaves, and Amos built a scarecrow that leaned permanently to one side but did the job just the same. One night, as the heat broke and the air turned damp with storm, Faye stood barefoot in the doorway, watching the lightning crawl across the horizon. "I didn't think I'd ever have this," she said. "Not again. Not like this." He stepped behind her, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You built it. We both did." He kissed the place just below her ear. "Still want chickens? Maybe next spring." They didn't need to say what came next. It was in the way they moved through their days, in how Galen mended the fence where the colt kept leaning, in how Faye scribbled lesson plans in the evening light, in the way Amos ran to meet him each time he turned up the path, with shavings caught in his cuffs. Years passed like that. The house held its shape through wind and snow and heat, and their hands grew more weathered, but never less sure. Abigail grew tall and quiet, with steady hands and a mind for drawing. Amos learned to shoe horses and never stopped carving. And Galen never left. Not once. The road no longer called because everything he'd ever needed, the quiet, the purpose, the love, was already beneath his boots, in the walls he'd helped raise, in the woman whose hand never left his. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the fields turned gold, Faye sat beside him on the porch, her head resting against his shoulder. The air smelled of cut hay and warm bread. Inside, the children, nearly grown, laughed over something soft and unimportant. Galen laced his fingers through hers. "You still think the stars changed?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think I did." She looked up at him, her eyes the same green as the day he found her. "I love you," she said. "I know," he whispered, kissing her temple. "And I'll carry that the rest of my days." And he did.